that, Chair.
Right, 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Preston City Council Virtual Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting. This meeting is being webcast live and is available to view. Before we continue with the agenda, I will ask the Scrutiny Support Manager, Jackie Pollard, to confirm who's in attendance, please. Over to you, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. You've got the Chair, Mrs Whittam, the Vice Chair, Councillor Potter, Mrs Brooks, Corker, Jewel, Saxena and Woolham. And we've got Councillor Khan, who's the exec member, and Councillor Morgan, who's substituting.
Thank you, Jackie. I presume everybody who's here has been mentioned. If not, please just put something in the chat, Jackie. Thank you. Before we start, I'd like to confirm a few housekeeping arrangements. Please can you all keep muted until invited to speak. And please keep your mobile phones on silent or switched off to avoid disruption. Same for your landlines for those who still have them. And please remember again that we're broadcasting live. The first item on the agenda are the Chairman's announcements. I don't have any particular answers, just to say that at some stage this morning we will be discussing the COVID situation. Now I know we've got it on for below the line, but some of this will be above the line, possibly at a suitable time this morning. And I think it's important anything that we can have above the line is open and transparent, so that people can listen what's going on. I think none of us will have escaped the news, what's going on in Preston this morning, so I think it's important that we probably discuss that at some stage. Jackie, can I now ask under item 2, are there any substitute members for the meeting, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've got Councillor Morgan for Councillor Henshaw, and Chair, we've also got a few more members have joined us, so they've come up on the chat, so I've added them to the list.
You've added them to the list. Thank you, Jackie, for that. Right, item 3, are there any declarations of interest to be made? Just a reminder as well, if you find you do have one during the meeting, please use the speech bubble and type DOI, and the Scrutiny Support Manager will ask you to speak. Has anybody got any interest? Could you please declare them now, please? John? Sorry, Councillor Potter, John, can you? I've got a DOI in the chat from you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's relating to item 13 on COVID. I am on the management committee of a licensed premises in Preston Grasshoppers. I am also a trustee of a charity within the city. If either of those things come up in the COVID and how they will be affected, obviously it's a personal interest for myself. Thank you.
Thank you for that, John. Thank you. I don't think we've got anybody else declaring any interest at the moment, but we can pick those, as I've already said, as we go along if there is any more. Right, okay, so item 4 on the minutes of the 7th of August 2020. Is everyone happy with the minutes that have been circulated, and can we agree them? I need a seconder for the minutes, please.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, John. Now, can I remind everyone that if you wish to speak on any item whilst it's under discussion, please indicate via the instant message facility by typing request to speak. Thank you. Item 5 is any decisions to be taken in accordance with the political party whip. If so, can we declare them now? I shouldn't imagine there will be. And item 6, can I ask the Scrutiny Support Manager to confirm there have been no items called in since the last meeting?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. Now, item 7, we've got Councillor Khan, the Cabinet Member for Communities and Social Justice, with us here today. So welcome to you, new leader. And I know you're going to update us on your portfolio and answer any questions we may have. Please don't forget to use the instant message with RTS if you wish to direct a question to Councillor Khan. So, Nuida, welcome this morning to our ONS meeting. I don't know if you want to start. I know yours is always a very, very interesting portfolio to a lot of us members. I don't know if you want to start by just giving an update on what's been happening. I mean, obviously there's been the food hubs and you've been involved in a lot of things, especially more so since lockdown, I'm sure, and everything else that's going on with the pandemic. So welcome, Nuida, and do you want to just give us an update, please, firstly? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sue. And I want to say thank you for inviting me to this meeting. It's always a bit harrowing. I think I'd just like to start with saying that equality, fairness and justice are key principles for Preston City Council, and we've always worked to ensure that we provide access to services to all our community. And I think during the last 6 months since the pandemic, the onset of the pandemic in March, this was really coming to practice, especially for our city and as a council, how we have delivered to our communities. And my portfolio, I think, was the main portfolio, as you mentioned now, that during this pandemic had various strands to it, which were important for the delivery of services to our communities and bringing communities together. So there were 3 particular areas that of the portfolio. As you mentioned, homelessness was a major issue that we had to deal with. The other was the food poverty programme, responding to those families and children in need. We then had, the equality agenda to look at how COVID was impacting on particular communities, and this is nationally and locally, and for us it's about the local impact this was having, and also the elderly and the social isolation that was impacting on individuals and how we were going to be supporting them. I would have to say that as a city, we've been really applauded for the work that we've done. I think some of this has been to the fact that we had policies and in place. We already have projects in place which we were able to then enhance those and put them into delivery. So I'll just talk around firstly, and I'm sure you're very much interested in knowing about the food poverty programme or the holiday markets, which then changed into food hubs. As a council and as a city, we had in place, as part of our food poverty strategy programme, was about 12 holiday markets. This were happening during the term time with schools and with some organisations. Recognising the needs and the onset of the pandemic, that we were going to now be faced with a greater demand. And I think we were able to meet that demand. We enhanced those holiday markets. And I think the key thing here has been the role of our community and faith sector and the role that they played with the council in the city in responding. I think without the community and faith organisations coming on board and working with us, it would have been very, very difficult. I would have to say that they have been our ambassadors. They have been pivotal. We had a lot of collaborative working with them. So what we did was we moved on from 40 holiday markets to 36 food hubs. And 36 food hubs is a large amount for a city. They were spread right out throughout 14 different wards. We had very much a coordinated approach. And I think we did this through setting up regular dialogue with community organisations, with our faith organisations. And what we did was we used our faith groups and our faith covenant in particular. This is where our faith covenant really came into play. Through our faith covenant, we had community leads, faith leads, that took responsibility to go back to the community, to go back to the institutions, places of worship, to bring back as information what the needs were, and also it was a two-way process really. And a lot of the community and religious institutions, I would have to say, that delivered on the holiday market, on the food hub at the food hub. So they all took responsibility. We set up for them a sort of sharing of information and what's that group. Yes, there were difficulties in the early stages. We knew we were going to get duplication, where we would have people accessing 2 or 3 food hubs. But however, over time, we overcame that. We also, at the council, as you will know, through the Lancashire Resilience Forum, we were responsible for the food delivery to the shielded, and a lot of the shielded came through from social services, came through from various other organisations, care homes and so forth, that required not only, it wasn't, shielded didn't just require, I must stress this, it wasn't just about food packages, it wasn't about that. This was also about maintaining some form of contact, knowing that these people were going to be facing isolation. So there was starting with Age UK, the training programme as well. I think on the whole, I would have to say with the whole programme that we had in place, without the collaborative working, the partnership working with both sectors, we wouldn't have reached where we were. It brought about a greater community cohesion, a greater recognition of what the council wasn't just there for particular services, we were there to come and engage. So that engagement was really risen throughout the whole pandemic, especially with this particular work. And having that regular contact on a weekly basis to share that information has also been very important. I'd just like to end on that, on the community and faith groups, just to say that we've also got to thank our officers. We've also always got to recognise and acknowledge the work that they've been doing and they, took part in. So I'd just like to say that without them, it would have been very, very difficult as well. Just moving on from the community and faith groups and the food poverty programme, I'd just like to move on to the homelessness. Obviously, homelessness is a big issue. It always has been an issue for nationally for many cities and for us as well. And it was a bit like similar to what we already had in place, good effective relationships, good working relationships with the Hoxton Centre, they were part of, and housing associations. So we had at the time 42 rough sleepers. We immediately, through the ministry, we worked with the Ministry of Housing and Communities, and we had a particular member from the ministry that was working with us. So it wasn't only about the finances that were given to all cities and councils at that time. It's never enough the resources that were given, but we accommodated, throughout the pandemic since March, we accommodated 248 single people, and this is in various accommodations. And I'll run through the different types of accommodation. But when we talk about the rough sleepers, we had about 42 at the time, and straight away they were put into either it was called purple rooms, which is hotel type of accommodation, so that they could be shielded and taken off the streets. When we actually did a bit of an audit and looked at, we didn't have any cases of COVID positive for any of our sleepers, despite the complexities and their alcohol and drug abuse, the habits that they have. So not only did we accommodate the sleepers, we had also single homeless people that we were putting into a particular accommodation. So we used the hotels, we used student accommodation, which we found was more appropriate for single people because they had ensuite rooms. And this is something that we have now applied for further funding, because we know that this is the type of accommodation that really suits individuals. We also used, I'm just going to run through here, bed and breakfast. We had 5 single people that had gone into there. We had 10, Fishergate was another, it's an accommodation that we have, various places, Whitburn Hotel, During this time, we also found, and what we have found is that we haven't had an increase in women, and we've had about 36 women, 10 of them were sleepers, and the other were just single women that had come into the area. So we've been working on them through our street link workers and sex workers, and putting in place packages of support for them. So it was a big task, I would have to say, for the last 6 months, especially working with the homeless, and how we were going to then, the concern and fear, which you'll have read in the social media, was that there would be then outback onto the streets. So we had to look at what was our next sort of support mechanism, or what policy, or what we were going to do. So we worked on a programme for them, recognising that there is a need and it is more appropriate for them to have single accommodation. We put in a bid for, it's called single accommodation, and it's called New Pathways or something. So we will look at a housing association that's working with us for 54 units, and this is going in over the next year or so. We'll be looking in the next 6 months to see how we can develop this further. We've had, at the time, we also worked with the drug and alcohol services, mental health services, to give a package of support, because these people have got lots of complexities, lots of issues, and they needed that support. So that was given to them as well, so that's been provided, and that's ongoing as well. If we move away from the homeless, we then have to look at the whole equality agenda. Black Lives Matter was a major issue at the time, as you know, it has been and still is. Through our programme, I would have to say that we supported many projects that were working with particular communities. We supported 2 particular projects that were working with the BAME community, and one was with the African Caribbean community, set up a food project for the elderly, which is still ongoing. Recognising that there is a need for some form of centre or a heritage centre for our Black African group. We are working on that and looking at possibilities of how the groups could come together and what they could access and what they could use. So we're working with them on that. I think also with the BAME community during this time, we set up a project during the Ramadan month for the Muslim elderly, and one of our groups for 3 weeks have supported us on that, and they were the deliverers on that. Also working with the university, and this is also about equality as well, because what has happened here is that we had over 800 international students who were stranded from UCLan, and if it wasn't for a particular project that was working with us in the food delivery programme, they took it on board to gather data around what were the issues, what were the concerns, what were their needs. And you know, there were 3 major needs. They had issues around mental health and well-being. They felt they weren't supported by the university. Everything had closed down. Food was another thing that was a major issue for them. Not having any finances and not being able to go back to their countries. They were virtually here, and landlord pressures were immense for evictions. So we supported them in all 3 areas, and for 2 weeks with this particular project. For 2 weeks we delivered food to them every day. They received hot food. We then worked with the university, started working with the Vice Chancellor and the welfare team at the university to ensure that these students, the various needs, the issues that they had could be met. So it was brokering as well at the same time, and you know, supporting them, and that's ongoing. And we actually, the church, the Minster, was one of our organisations that really worked with us on this. working with the elderly, obviously, we work with age UK. We haven't got to forget, and we did not forget that, you know, it's about all the plants, all the different characteristics. And we tried as much as possible, especially within my portfolio, to ensure that we didn't forget about the people that were disabled, working with Denver, working with the organisations, the front leaders that respond and work with that particular group. So even with the aged, with Age UK, looking at what services they had in place during this pandemic. You know, what further could the council do? So we had like dementia group, we had the training services. We've now set up a digital inclusion where we're offering and giving anybody over 50 the opportunity to have a laptop or an iPad to use, because we recognise that they've been detached in a way from the community and they can't get out as they would have done and want to remain in contact. Can you hear me? Sorry. Oh, God.
Sorry, I'm coming back. No, I've got it on mute. Yes, we can hear you there. Yeah. I'd just like to say, sorry, I'm glad you just asked that question. There's a real lot of feedback noise coming, and I'm not sure about whether people who are listening into this webcast is also picking that up, but I know it's been reported on the chat, and I just hope we can do something about it. And can I just remind members of the committee to keep on mute unless you're actually speaking, please. But yeah, Nwida, we can, and I'm absolutely fascinated, so please carry on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so with obviously our older population, like I said, we've got this digital program that's in place, and I will be sending out to all members the opportunity to refer in. And we're looking at start one referral. If you look at the number, maybe I'm going to decide on this, how I'm going to do this, that maybe it might be to the leaders of each groups, and then for you to refer in maybe 2 to 3 people that you think would really benefit from this. So it's a free laptop, a free iPad, and they get training with it as well, and it would be really, really beneficial for them. I think also just on disability, recognising that the rate of people that have been impacted, not being able to get out and access going into provision or support where they were having various centres that were open. So there was online communication through Denver and other organisations, and we also, through our weekly community chat that we had with the groups, to ensure that there was some feedback to us as what further we could do from the council as well. So that was ongoing and still is ongoing. I think with the young people, we've undertaken an audit of all the services, the different groups that are operating, just to look at, obviously not having a youth zone, looking at how some of the groups can work together, how they can share resources. And I actually forgot to mention that funding has been a big part of, during this pandemic, giving access or helping and supporting organisations and projects in obtaining funding, helping them with funding applications. Because with COVID, there's been specific funding for various groups and organisations that you can apply for right across the different characteristics and the work they're doing. So we really have been, sharing that information, sending that out, and ensuring that groups can access that. So that's been very vital and important. I think this is where we recognise that, yes, there is a big gap in services for young people. We're talking about, not very young, but 16 to 25-year-olds as well. So we've done an audit to look at what we have in place, what's doing, what groups, and we've got one of the officers from the community engagement team that we're working on and looking at bringing these groups together, and as I said, about sharing resources and sharing sharing resources, and it's also physical resources. It's about centres, rather than them setting up something. If somebody's got a boxing club operating, well, why can we not share that and access that? So that's the sort of thing that we're doing around the work with young people and that area. I don't know, I could go on, to be honest with you. I would have to say that the 6 months, apart from being challenging, they've been rewarding as well. We had to hit the ground running, we did. But the biggest, I think, achievement that we obtained or gained from all of this is the greater partnership working with our communities, the community cohesion that's being developed. Not seeing the council as a threat, as a body that doesn't really engage. You know, the engagement has really flourished, I would have to say. And we've had a very good response from all community and faith groups. And they've been vital, as I said before, they've been our ambassadors. And even the APPG, they invited us, I've been invited to a number of sort of, you know, platforms to talk about the work that Preston have been doing and to share that. And they see it as sharing good practice, and they applauded us for the work that we've done. And also, I forgot to mention, we continue to work with the veterans, with the Veterans Hub, as I'm Armed Forces champion, so I have a big interest in that to ensure that, you know, we don't forget about our veterans and we do what we can. So we've obtained a bronze award, and we're working on a silver award for the council in the work that we're doing with the veterans community as well. I think that's it from me. I don't know.
Nawida, thank you ever so much for that. You have such a wide and interesting portfolio, and I think that's why, you know, obviously there's so much to update us on, and you're absolutely right about community. This is, for a long time, there hasn't been that community cohesion, and this pandemic, if there's anything good about this pandemic, is that it has brought people together and people wanting to help each other more than ever before. So we have got a number of people who've requested to ask you questions, but just before we move on to that, I have noticed that Councillor Meehan has got a declaration of interest which she's put into the chat. Jackie, can I just check, does Councillor Meehan need to say anything about a DOI, please? Thank you.
Chair, I've made a note of it, thank you.
Okay, that's absolutely brilliant, thank you. Right, I've got a number of people who want to ask questions, if you're okay with that now, Nawida. And the first person I've got is Councillor Jonathan Saxena, please. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that every time I had a problem with somebody who hadn't received any food or wasn't on the list, I'd gone on to Nawida and it was sorted within a few hours. So I think that was something quite remarkable. But what I've been wondering about is, as we came towards the end of the food hubs and the parcel and so on, was there some difficulty with some people in trying to wean them away from it, if you like? Because I did find there was a certain amount of that. And also, I have come across, unfortunately, a number of people who were actually signing into about 5 or 6 food hubs, some of them with one, and they were selling some of the produce with they were getting, and some of that going around with the police eventually. But it is rather upsetting when this sort of thing happens. I'm wondering, were you aware that this is all widespread? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, I mean, abuse and exploitation does happen, and we were expecting that. And we dealt with it. I think this is where what really worked was the sharing of information, because we had a group set up where all the food hubs were members of that. And so, for example, where you would sort of raise that this particular person has been accessing food from one particular hub, so that information was being shared, and then so to alert the other food hubs that that particular person was not to access from any others, right? So we were able to tackle that, In the initial stage, like I said before, it was difficult. We did have a lot of duplication here and there, but as time went on and we were able to consolidate the food hubs, and we have systems in place where they were taking on, reviewing what the service users, so to speak, or the people that they had on the list that were providing food to. So from that, we've also set up a central database now of that information feeding into, so that duplication doesn't happen. So it was unavoidable in the early stages, I would have to say, but we soon overcame that by working with the different food hubs on that. Your question about whether it was difficult for people to come off or wean them off the food hubs, because we started off with, there was 12, then there was 24, then there was 36, and of those 36 now we have 10 food banks. The food banks were totally independent of the food hubs because they were self-financing, self-supporting. They were mainly from the faith sector organisations like the mosques or the temple or the churches that were providing the food banks, and we still have 10 food banks ongoing. We reduced the number of the food hubs to 20. We have 20 now from the 26 and 32 that we had. But surely over time, people accepted it. I would say that we haven't had any complaints or people, saying that they still require. Where they do, then there's an assessment that takes place. If that need is there, then they will be provided with that. But I would say overall, no, there hasn't been any great difficulty. And we just had a review meeting a few weeks ago to review this, and that wasn't what was coming back to us. We're still there, and we're ready for the next spike. If that's, it seems like that, things are changing so rapidly, and we're ready for the demand should that arise again. Yeah.
Thank you, Noida. Jonathan, are you happy with that? Have you got any more questions? Thank you. Jonathan,
Saxena, you're on mute.
Okay. Jonathan, I think you might be having a couple of problems unmuting, so I'll come back to you if there is something else you wish to ask. So I will come back to you. I've got Councillor Ron Woolen next on my list. So over to you, Ron, to ask your question, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Noida. Thank you for that very detailed synopsis of your role, and thank you for all the hard work you're putting into that. As you know, the government allocated an amount of funding for the homeless in the Preston area. I'm just wondering if you could just explain to us how that money is being prioritised for the homeless. I have noted there are still a certain amount of homeless people, or appear to be homeless, on the streets, particularly around the Fishergate area. I think you mentioned earlier you've managed to house about 248 rough sleepers. Could you just give me an update, please, on the situation with regard to that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Ron. The 278 people that I mentioned were people that were looking for accommodation, that didn't have any form of accommodation. And out of those, there was a certain percentage of rough sleepers. We had around about 42 rough sleepers. The money that came through has been spent on the provision of accommodation straight away. It wasn't cheap, it was very expensive for the 4 months, for at least 4 to 5 months that to place people in and pay for that. Also, we looked at, other delivery programs now that we've got in place. Now, the numbers that you're talking about, yes, we know we've got about 80 rough sleepers that are back out on the streets. You've got to remember that these people have got complex issues, they've got complex needs. Even when we were accommodating them, we had to bring in security to ensure that they did not leave those premises. Because of the complexities, it has been very, very difficult. It was difficult, now it has been to retain them in the accommodation that's been given to them. They have refused that accommodation. However, the support is still ongoing. We have part of that money that is being given that we are further requesting, which all councils are, because the money that has been allocated from the ministry was just not enough to meet the needs of this particular vulnerable group. So we put into place a package of support that they will have a wraparound support with drug and alcohol services, with mental health services to come in, help and support them, and also to look at particular type of accommodation. So working with the housing associations and the Foxton Centre with that. It is very, very difficult, and we continue through our outreach services and outreach team. We've not let go of them. You can't forget about them, but you can't also force them into accommodation that they will not stay in. So the support is ongoing. Ron, I hope that sort of answers the question or not.
Thank you, Nerida.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. Can I just come back to Jonathan, if you can manage to contribute now and unmute. Do you have anything further to ask? I'll just ask you before I bring Councillor John Potter in next. So
the only point I did want to make was that I know Nerida did mention that there were very few complaints, and so the only complaint that I had was that we had one person who didn't like the food party, but they didn't like rhubarb. Now that's the only complaint that I got. It suggests that we must be doing fairly well.
brilliant. Thank you for that, Jonathan, and I'm sure Nerida will be encouraged by that feedback. So thank you. Can I bring in Councillor John Potter next, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got several questions. The first one is just a bit of a follow-up from the last full council when you were asked about the Heartstone Odyssey project, and you said you would update us. I was wondering if you have an update on that.
Yeah, due to the pandemic, John, Heartstone, because the schools were no longer, continuing and they closed down, so we had to put that to rest for the time being. However, the current situation is with schools going back, we have planned in for October the 22nd, we're working with the Harris. We're going to be having an event at the Harris where the schools will all be invited to give an update on the work that's been done around Heartstone and the project, and also to revive it a bit as well. Our from Lancashire County Council, we have from a link worker that's been working with the schools, and that has continued, and the director of Heartstone as well. Now this, we're going into a new phase with this. What we were expecting, what we wanted to do was once the project had finished with the schools, that we would have a massive parade in Preston and be able to showcase a lot of the work. We will be doing that at the Harris on the online platform, and you will be sent an invite to that, and that's taking place on October the 22nd. So the work is ongoing with that now. We've got back into that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can I continue, Chair?
Yeah, absolutely. Carry on, John. Thank you.
One thing that I've raised several times over the years that tends to not get much attention is the fate of rural poverty and rural communities that are struggling. In terms of, there's a perception out there because you're surrounded by green fields, you maybe not have the same concerns that other people in urban areas do. What are you doing as part of your portfolio to help rural communities in poverty?
I think poverty all round, it's a big issue, and all I can say is that during this pandemic, that was further raised. Your point about rural poverty and rural communities. what they were facing. It's accessibility as well to various services. That is now part of my next sort of phase on my agenda of work to be done around that, and I will be working on the officers to look at that. So I can't really offer you any more at this moment in time, John, but just to say it's been recognised and it's an area of work that I have got planned in place.
Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing about that, because it's an issue that often gets overlooked. My final one, Chair, is actually, I've had conversations with various groups, and what's interesting is we want to empower communities. And from my point of view, one of the big ways we empower them is through the ballot box and actually getting them to stand and be represented, etc. Next year's elections, local elections, will be the largest since 1973. What are your plans to help engage with communities that sometimes don't get engaged in local politics and actually involved with elections within the city?
I think firstly, I think it's been great that we have created this great sort of partnership working, greater community cohesion between the community and faith sectors. And I think they play a vital role because they are the ones that have more contact with communities, you know, whether it's through the congregations or society as a whole. And it's through them that we can see that you know, work will be undertaken, or where you would be able to empower, get people to recognise firstly the importance of a vote, the importance of them in society and the role that they've got to play. So throughout this pandemic, as I've said, I think a lot of that has been achieved through our partnership and engagement with our communities. And I can really see that if they have come forward and been part and parcel of the delivery and helping each other, that this will also be achieved as well.
I suppose. So just a final point from me on that, just to come back, is actually it is going to, not only are the elections the biggest since 1973, there'll also be likely some sort of social distancing and COVID issues around that time. So making sure vulnerable communities are able to have their democratic say and don't feel like they're excluded from the process is something you'll start working with election services and other officers to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and John, as I mentioned before, you know, this is where we started with the digital inclusion programme that we've got in place, recognising that there are sectors of our communities, of our society and people that are not able to engage, and we're giving them that opportunity so that they can have full engagement with all services that they need to access and having that democratic right, as you say. So that is something that we're working on, and a lot of the community groups have received funding for digital programmes to be put in place, and digital inclusion, as it's called. Yeah, so there's lots of inclusivity, I would say, in the work that's being done and is going to be delivered in the future as well.
Thank you, Louisa, and thank you, John. Is that the end of your questions? Yes, thank you.
It is. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I've got Councillor Lynn Brooks next on my list, please. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
It's such a wonderful pleasure to hear all the stuff that, you know, the hard work that goes into your portfolio, Rosa, and it, you know, it's really well done to everybody's involved in it, and obviously you're leading on it, so credit as well. So I think the issues that I've got really is how ready do you think we are for the next sort of, when it comes, the next wave that's predicted, you know, to spike up. And do you see any particular pressure points that maybe need to be beefed up? And wrapped around that is how you see the overall funding situation. You know, are we going to be left with a black hole somewhere? How confident are you that we will be able to carry on all the fantastic work?
Yeah, resources and funding is always an issue. There's never enough of it. However, this time has given all councils, I would assume, especially for ourselves, to learn, review, and at each phase, what we were doing was we were reviewing and looking at future possibilities, what could occur and how we could meet those challenges ahead. So we have, I would say, that built in the possibilities that should we have the next wave and the next, greater spike, how we will meet that demand through especially the food poverty programme. We know how we will be meeting that. Our partners are well working with us on that. Similar with homelessness, we still are short of money and finances, but that does not mean that we won't be able to accommodate and work with that vulnerable, people of our society. So I would say in many ways we have been prepared, and the whole of the community engagement team and the various works that we're doing, but resources are a big factor. We may not be able to deliver to the extent that we would like to, and maybe some programmes may have to be, shortened in some way, but I'm sure that as a council and the work that we've done, we'll be able to enhance and continue with that to meet the demand that's coming. When demand does come in quick. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Is that okay, Lee? Yes.
I think us councillors can personally do to help with, with the work in your portfolio. So apart from me finding homeless people for you, is there anything else?
Finding the money. Yeah, I would have to say that I have always tried along the sharing information. I think that's important. Sharing information to everybody to know what's going on, because it affects, the different wards and different areas. Just keeping you all in the loop. And we have had, different councillors from different, parties helping out with the food hubs and various other projects as well. And I'm not averse to that. I welcome that, and that, that's fine with me. So it's just continue to engage in working partnership, and I think we've got to see this as, this pandemic has come, and if it's brought communities together, then we from the council should lead from this and we have been, to work together and show there's solidarity in the work that's being done, rather than too critical, and just remembering that, we don't have the resources that we would like to have to, deliver some of the work that we want to deliver. Yeah. So I hope that answers my question. Your question is
It's fine. We'll just keep telling people what good work we're doing and helping them get access then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. I don't have anybody else down requesting to speak, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of points with regard to what Noida just said. Yeah, a number of councillors have all helped during this pandemic, and I think at this time we all pulled together and the politics came out of politics at that time, and it was more team pressed. And Noida, I'd just like to ask a quick question about your armed forces work. Obviously it's been a difficult year for armed forces with VE Day, VJ Day cancelled as well. We don't know what's going to be happening with Remembrance Sunday, but I know these things are very important to the armed forces community and others as well. You mentioned about the bronze standard that the council had achieved and that you were going for silver. Can you tell us a bit more about what that entails? What does that actually mean for the council, and what, how is that achieved? Thank you.
Yeah, this was set up through, we've got a Covenant Hub for the veterans as well, for our forces Covenant Hub. This is right through all different cities and councils. So these awards are gold, silver and bronze out to show and demonstrate, where councils can demonstrate the work that they're doing with veterans at various levels, So bronze level will be that your frontline staff within the council have got training, they're all aware of what to ask if a veteran comes along, and also be aware of the services, because we have the Royal British Legion, we have various other services that can prioritise and give access to services for the veterans. It is also around, as a council, if we have members of staff within the council that are volunteers within different armed forces, you know, like the reserves, we give them 2 weeks leave, I can't remember what sort of title it is, but paid leave, we give them paid leave. So that as a council ticks the box for us for particular criteria, and I think we're going to reach the silver on that. And so for each award there is different criteria you've got to meet, especially in supporting the veterans. And we also, part of that is that we have a regular Covenant Club meeting and network meeting with other organisations that are supporting veterans. And we also look at the types of services that are being provided. And within the council also, on our first when a veteran comes to say the front desk, and one of the things that we've got to always have in place is to ask if they have ever served in the armed forces, are they a veteran, you know, so that sort of ticks the box on that as well. So there's different criterions for that, yeah. And I have to, yeah, I went and collected that bronze award on the HMS, is it Queen Elizabeth?
Right.
Yeah, so I went to Liverpool and I got a tour of it. It was the last tour that was taking place, and it was docked in Liverpool. So yeah, that's where I collected the award. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. That's very interesting. Thank you. I have actually got one more request to speak. Let me just double check. Yes, Councillor Mark Jewell. Mark, do you want to come in, please, with your question? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Khan, thank you for your overall summary. I just want to acknowledge all the excellent work. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
All the excellent work that you're doing. That in short, I just haven't really grabbed hold of what's not being done, and that's not as a criticism. My question is really what services within your profile have suffered from COVID and the funding constraints that you face.
I think overall, all services, especially, I know we've been given quite a bit of money for, and people, when you look at it in real terms, it's not a lot of money for the homeless and what we receive and what we want to do. I wouldn't say they suffered, because we were able to deliver what we could. So we were able to meet those needs. I think the gaps are, I think this is something that I'm looking at and reviewing, is maybe with the provision for young people. That is an area that really we could do with more money, because we don't have a youth zone, we don't have a purpose-built sort of facility, and with youth crime and crime and disorder issues, antisocial behaviour issues, that is something that I feel that really, you know, we could do with getting further money or to improve those particular services. If anything, that would be one service I would say that really needs a lot more support and help. We've also got to take on board that with Black Lives Matter, it came to the fore that the structural inequalities that exist, the institutional racism that exists, and how we're going to tackle that. We started looking, I think you've got to always start to look in-house first and look at your own policies and your protocols that you have in place, how you are meeting those community needs. So we've started looking at our own equality impact assessments, to be able to respond back to the criticisms that, and we all will face criticism as a council, we do face criticisms at times from different sectors of the community, but we've got to be able to ensure that our own house is in order, and which it is. We've got, you know, as I said, through the equality impact assessments, we'll show and demonstrate exactly what we're doing, what we've done, and how further we're going to be improving services as well. Yeah. So that's the ongoing work that we're undertaking. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Nuida. I think we all recognise that we can't do everything, and you know, some things do have to drop down the priority list, which we'll find shortly when we're, funny enough, we're talking about the task what we've got at the moment and have been dealing with over the last few months. I haven't got any more questions, you'll be probably relieved to know, but and thank you. I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of all of us here on this committee for your excellent presentation and your update, and I hope it wasn't too much having to deal with this morning, but thank you ever so much for your attendance.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Right, so if we move on with the agenda now, please. Item 8, the future interview with Cabinet members. Our next Cabinet member will be Councillor Bailey at our next meeting, so that's the next one. Item 9 is the update on the task and finish groups and the Crime and Disorder Committee. Now, before I ask Jackie just to give her report, I just wanted to mention, as members of this committee all know, we did come up with a number of topics that were submitted for our next task and finish groups, and then we had to vote on these. I think we all know that. The topics chosen were COVID, which is very important and very relevant, and equally resources. The second choice was resources to deprived wards, which are equally an important topics. At this moment in time, we don't really have the resources to start those two subjects and get into those at this minute, because we've still got the climate change on the go, and you know, it's just difficult at this time to allocate resources, but they are still ready. They will be done at some stage, but just not straight away. And I'm sure all members will support that due to the things that are actually going on. It's not making those subjects any less important. They're both really, really important subjects, but we're just going to have to do what we can and when we can. And I think it's important that we carry on with our scrutiny function and interviewing cabinet each time to understand what they're doing and, you know, carrying out our duties as a scrutiny committee. I'll now hand over to Jackie to give an update on the current situation of task and finish groups and also the Crime and Disorder Committee. Over to you, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see from the report, the urban parking work plan study was completed. There has been an update being put on it regarding COVID, and it should be going, if not to the meeting of Cabinet on the 30th of September, then the one after that. The homelessness work plan study went to Cabinet on the 12th of August, which was accepted by the Cabinet, and the recommendations agreed. The climate change meeting is on the 30th of September, and the agenda will be going out on Monday, or perhaps this afternoon. Crime disorder is due to be published this afternoon as well. So there's not a lot to say on those, in that the meetings haven't actually happened yet.
Thank you, Jackie. I think we're just carrying on ongoing with our climate change and everything else, and we've learned from having to use Skype, and now it's a lot easier to. We've done from our little mini group of the climate change. We've carried out on a recent interview with an officer, and I think it's very successful doing it that way. I don't know, Jonathan, if you have anything to add as chair of Crime and Disorder Committee, if there's anything you wish to add at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Not a great deal, except the main item which we're dealing with is night crime. We have had one meeting since the full lockdown, which was finding our feet really, because of a new medium in a sense. But we had quite a lengthy presentation from Alison Hatton on the violence and the youth violence for and things and that sort of stuff. I got to have some of the interview in the next meeting. We're also going to have updates on various other things which we've been discussing recently, in case there's anything more that we need to know about. So that will be on the agenda next. There was a request of council to have a special meeting about crime and violence and the issues to do with stop and search. So that will probably be coming sometime between now and Christmas. I think we can get a special meeting into the timetable. So that's something that's where we are at the moment. The two smaller ones, control of dogs and roadless crawlers. We'll try and get them in as we can. They only require 5 members each, so it shouldn't be quite that so difficult. It's getting speed to that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for that update. It's interesting to know what's coming forward under your committee. Thank you. There's nothing else on that item as far as I'm aware. So item 10, any changes, Jackie, to membership for the task and finish groups? Are you aware of any? Thank you.
Chair, no, I've not been notified of any.
Okay, that's brilliant, thank you. Is it a convenient time now, do we think, to bring in the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council, if he's online as well, regarding anything he can share above the line on COVID? Adrian, are you there? Is there anything you can share at this moment? Thank you. And if members have any questions, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the leader's here too, and I think probably appropriate the leader commences, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Sorry, Matthew, I was trying to go through the chat and see if you were there, but yeah, absolutely brilliant. Over to you, Matthew, as leader, if you would like to say something now. Thank you.
Hi, Sue. Good morning to yourself as chair and to everyone on the Scrutiny community. I hope everyone's okay. You know, it's a challenge for all of us. We're all human beings, so I really hope everyone's doing well at the moment, because we're 6 months into this now, aren't we? So it is difficult for everyone. I think what we need to do is we need to concentrate mainly on our broad strategy on tackling the pandemic in the first bit, on what might be coming via a press release in the next few hours from government. I think we've got to deal with that below the line, if that's okay. Because obviously I don't want to breach any protocols, which obviously we can't really do. So where we are at the moment is we're in a situation where we've got the highest COVID infection rate since March or April, I think. We're now at 129 per 100,000 cases. 183 cases have been confirmed in the last week. We've got a test positive rate of 6.2%. So obviously that's very, very much a concern at the moment for all of us. I want to talk about the process we go through. For the last number of weeks, we have what's known as a process which begins at the Lancashire Engagement Outbreak Board, which is the Lancashire County Council, that body. There's Angie Ridgewell on there, there's Jeff Driver, there's a cabinet member for the relevant cabinet member, Sean Turner, who chairs it, and then we invite as well Dr. Sapsy, who's the Director of Public Health, leaders of councils, MPs and chief executives. So that is a process we have where we actually discuss what we want to negotiate with government to hopefully get a package which will tackle the pandemic but also support our economy as well and do other things. So that's the process that we go through. The principles I've taken since this has begun is that I am not a medically qualified professional. The Director of Public Health is in his team. I'm being told that I'm being offered scientific medical evidence about what's going to keep the community safe. So generally I'm accepting that evidence. So everything that we've put forward I've actually supported from the Director of Public Health. We've not received everything, but the decision to impose people not mixing within 2 households a few weeks back in Preston, and also no more than 6 individuals outside. That was medical evidence and we supported that. Some other politicians didn't, but I think we can be justified in backing that now in the situation we're in, basically. So that's where we are, but we're also crucially, we're asking for support because you've got to have an infrastructure in place that's going to effectively tackle this pandemic, and that is things like supporting people to self-isolate. There's been a move on that. They're going to get £95 if they weren't entitled to sick pay or were self-employed. It's our argument it should be like junior service if they get full pay for those 2 weeks. But again, that has not been forthcoming from government, and that is a serious issue because you're finding that I think 56% of people on low pay are not self-isolating. So they are self-isolating. So obviously they're spreading it to many others. There's then also things around a fully resourced and localised test and trace programme, which we've been asking for, and there seems to be some kind of cross-party support for that. Again, the current centralised system, I think run by Circle at the moment, is very inefficient in that it's only just over 50% effective. People who do have the virus and are self-isolating, who are actually putting the names of the people who've been in contact with, that isn't, they're actually not being contacted by the service. It's our argument we can run it better in the local public sector with public health teams and councils and others. And then very recently, obviously, we've got schools going back and we've got universities. We've asked for enhanced testing for our schools, colleges and universities, including asymptomatic testing. And I think a lot of that is actually on-site testing. So obviously, I know that kids, if they have symptoms, and they will be sent home and they might be tested in one of our community facilities, but also there's an argument that we should have testing on those sites as well. So that's what we're asking for. Whether we're going to get all of that, I'm not very confident, but that is our basic position. Again, that is the evidence that's given to us by the Director of Public Health. And it's a really important point that we actually need this resource to effectively fight it. So unless we actually get moves towards getting that, we're going to have quite a number of problems going forward, because what we are seeing at the moment is we're seeing a small increase in hospitalisation in Lancashire. And obviously the infection rate is mainly amongst the younger demographic. But what we've got coming up in the next few weeks and months is we've got a winter flu season. So you've got a combination of COVID and winter flu, which is really scary. Now, the evidence again is that it may well spread from the younger generation to the older generation. And I'm very scared about what the consequences might be when we get into late October, November, December, and that is not far off. So that is why we've really got to have a lot of solidarity amongst us councillors to really get this message out about where we are. And obviously I have a conversation with you, Sue, and John privately, a cross-party arrangement we have with Adrian about that. And obviously there will be an announcement from government soon, but there will be a Lancashire-wide response to this. We were arguing for a similar thing, and we've not got precisely what we wanted, but there is going to be a Lancashire-wide response to this. And I think we've just got all that responsibility to really get the message out there. We do understand totally the pressure on businesses. They're struggling, and a big part of what we're asking for is resources for local businesses because they are being hit. And again, that probably won't be forthcoming either, but we're asking for it. We understand people are frustrated with it. It's been going on for 6 months, but whilst things may seem quite tame at the moment, the risk is, the significant risk is that we could be in serious problems in the next few months, really. Just in terms of Preston, obviously we've got the 2 community-based testing centres. We're disappointed the LRF have taken the decision to restrict that to 5 days out of 7 because they were very popular. Again, we've been having capacity issues there in the sense that we've had to use volunteers to marshal them. We've had to use our own staff when they could be doing other services. So that's the big thing we're asking for at the moment as well, that we should increase the testing capacity. We've got a new facility that's at UCLAN that's going to be established soon. That's going to be for people who go through the national test and trace infrastructure. Obviously ours is just a walk-in, and the really good thing is whether you've got symptoms or not got symptoms, you can get a test straight away. Yeah. So obviously we've got that facility coming on soon, but we'll do what we can. And obviously the leader this morning mentioned about the community engagement we've had. And from day one, I invited religious leaders into conversations with the leader and myself. Also, various members of the voluntary sector, disabled groups and others, older people's groups, BME groups, to actually say, we're in this together. We've got to carry the whole community through, and that engagement's going on still. And there was a community meeting. There was about 40 representatives of the community sector that Adrian was at a few weeks back in August, to actually really, you know, get our approach and get support from the community. So that's where we are at the moment. I'll let Adrian say a little more, but on to the specifics about what is going to be coming later today, and that is something sadly we're going to have to discuss below the line. But I think it's just helpful to have the broad approach I've taken, which is that I'm going to support scientific-based evidence, and I'm going to lobby for things. I'm going to get other council leaders and others to lobby for them, and hopefully that'll do some good, because I just feel we're fighting this pandemic without the support that we need. And I'm not going to get political, you know, I'm just, you know, because I think there's cross-party support for it now, but we can't fight this without the resource we need. It's very much it's a bit like a wartime effort, isn't it, in many ways, with the enemy being invisible. You know, we really need to have that collective spirit going forward, and, you know, but we'll continue doing what we can to tackle the pandemic going forward. So I'll just see if our Chief Executive has anything further to add on that general position, and potentially a few more specifics around figures and other things that you might want to add. So thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. And I think, you know, you were right, we've all discussed it, and we are all on the same side, as in working together to get the best for Preston and supporting each other through this difficult time. If we don't ask, we won't get, will we? So at least if we ask, we're trying to get more resources, and hopefully we'll get something out of it. I'll hand over to Adrian now, and I am conscious I've got one person down, which is Ron, requesting to speak, but Adrian, I'll come to you first, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and obviously thank you to the leader for his update. All I can do really is reiterate some of the messages that the leader's already outlined, that our position is enormously worrying. 3 weeks ago, we had got our rates down to 19.7 cases per 100,000, and we thought we were able to make a request to government the following week for to move out of an area of intervention status. Alas, since then, our rates have virtually doubled every week, and we've been second in the country in terms of highest rates. We've been third, we've been sixth, but there's no prizes with that level of league table performance. It means that people are ill with COVID in the city and at risk of serious medical conditions developing from there. We keep a very close eye on the work that's going on across Lancashire. We are very embedded in the Lancashire Resilience Forum, and we are aware of the concerns of the National Health Service. I think this authority needs to be quite clear, and I know we've had complete cross-party support on this, that COVID is not something that can be put aside and considered to be nothing worse than perhaps a bad cold. For many people, the consequences can be incredibly serious, and as the leader has said, as we approach winter, the real risk is COVID, which has been at least 50% plus within younger people, the under 30s, who probably have lower symptoms but can have long-term serious complications with fatigue and other things that can last for months. But it is absolutely the key risk that the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions will get infected and will need hospitalisation and could have far worse consequences. That linked with the winter flu arrangement. And again, I think we should make a plea for all those who need a winter flu jab or of that age group, etc. And the category has been widened, that we will be doing work across the city to encourage people to have a flu jab. But the position is likely to get worse. So we know people are frustrated with the restrictions. Some claim not to understand them, or they don't apply to them. Clearly, that is not the position. As the leader has said, we are expecting a government announcement today that we believe will cover the whole of Lancashire and other areas in the north, and we need to stand by and deal with that. But for our city, this has impacts on individuals. Yes, we know that people's individual freedoms are restricted, but that is being done in order to protect the health of the whole community. Businesses will suffer. with people not being able to return to a normal life, and if the hospitality sector suffers further, clearly that is a worry for us. Preston has a great range of restaurants, bars, the nighttime economy. The offer we have is excellent, and we want to support all those businesses in the city, and have been seeking to do as much as we possibly can throughout the pandemic. So the key messages remain about trying to keep people focused on whatever the rules are, and we know that changes in rules do lead to confusion. We saw clear messaging. We can only ask that members continue their support in that messaging. Testing, again, as the leader has said, has been quite a frustrating operation at times. We put an immense amount of resource with our colleagues in public health in dealing with the 2 community testing facilities. They have been very busy. Earlier this week, we had record-breaking numbers. We're up to about 620 tests between the 2 per day, which is solid, non-stop work. Alas, we've had, the public have had to queue at times for up to 2 hours, which is not a great experience for them, but we've ensured that anybody in the queue gets a test. They are, alas, now closed on Thursdays and Fridays, which is not something that we particularly welcome. We know that the message has got to be about getting testing, and this is probably one of the biggest concerns that we have, that we've got very high rates. We're an area of intervention. We need immediate access to testing for those that are clearly symptomatic, but those that are asymptomatic. And the asymptomatic cases, people basically showing no key symptoms or very minimal symptoms, are at least 40% of cases, and it's more common in young people. So if we can't get those people tested, they won't be self-isolating, and potentially they are spreading the virus to many other people. So we cannot underestimate the need to have a really effective testing system in operation, and the advice we have from government is that the sufficient lab capacity is not going to be available, at least during this month. So that remains an enormous concern, and we are doing whatever we can to lobby for additional testing capacity. The testing regime will be changing over the next few weeks, and we will advise members of what that is and when the new facilities are available. We're moving from the local community testing facilities operated by public health, supported by ourselves, to, they're called local testing facilities, but they're basically operated via a national operator. Deloitte's have a contract for that. They will be operating throughout the winter, and there will be at least one, we hope 2, in Preston. They will operate on a bookings only system, we're told, and will be booked through the national system. We would like to have some capacity for drop-in sessions, so that people can, with symptoms or whatever, can get in fast. Whether that will be possible or not, I don't know, but we will keep members informed, and I can assure you that this authority is absolutely focused on dealing with COVID. We have been at this for 6 months now, and there's no end in sight. And again, I thank members for your continuous cooperation and support in this endeavour. It's it is like a wartime effort, and I've used this before, and you'll be getting fed up with it, but we are in all-out war on COVID, and we've got peacetime resources. So we are, it's keeping everything going is a massive concern. But we are a fantastic authority, great members, great staff, and I think we can be very proud of the work we're doing collectively to support the people of Preston. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you for that. I've got a couple of people requesting to speak, a couple of members requesting to speak. Before I just bring in the first one, which will be Councillor Ron Woolen, I just wanted to ask a general question about the messages the Director of Public Health actually puts out into the community, and how are these disseminated, for the want of a better word, really. There's been a number of issues where children at nursery have been sent home because they've got a cold or sniffles or whatever, been told to go for testing, and I wasn't personally aware that until recently that you can't test children under 5, and people have queued up for an hour and a half to get a test and then been told, well, we're not doing tests on children of that age. How do we get, where does that information come from? Does the Director of Public Health have like a sheet that says who should be going for testing? Or is there something we can tap into through the LRF that we can use as councillors to get those messages across? Thank you.
In terms of testing and schools and young children and nurseries, there has been very detailed guidance to schools and other education establishments from the Director of Public Health. Obviously for Lancashire, that's gone to Lancashire schools in Blackpool and Blackburn via their Directors of Public Health, but there has been a coordination around that messaging. In terms of the detail, and I think probably I've seen over the last couple of days, a really good sort of flow chart that's easily understandable for schools and for parents, where basically saying what are the symptoms, and if you've got a runny nose, that is not a COVID symptom. So perhaps there have been schools that have been over anxious. It's getting used to the new situation. Schools have been largely closed, bar for those children of key workers or those with a range of special needs and interventions. And perhaps it was, and we knew there was going to be challenges with reopening schools. So the information is there. I think there's been I'll rephrase it. There's been teething problems in terms of following the procedures, and I think we already know that the guidance probably needs to be clear for both parents and for schools. We believe it is for schools, and the key interaction for parents is with their school. That's how the system works for clarity, because school situations in some cases are individual. So the relationship is between the school and the parents. So the information has been given in a clear way to the school, and we're trying to support, or the LRF is trying to support, that information is made clear to parents. It does seem to be becoming more straightforward. We know early this week we had whole classes being sent for testing when there was one pupil with symptoms, and that is not the procedure at all. The child with symptoms should self-isolate with their household and should seek a test, but it doesn't, until it's confirmed. The school bubble can continue until there's a confirmed case, and then there is a procedure to follow. In terms of children being tested, children under 5 can be tested, but not routinely at the community testing facilities because of either staff training or the swab kits. And I know this has been controversial. We had signage up, but what became clear, the queues got so long that by the time people got to the signage, it was, they'd been in the queue quite some time. So that was in day 1 of big queues. By day 2, we'd improved signage. We put more staff on our testing facilities. We had 3 people sort of managing the queue, managing the system, giving people information. Those with small children basically checking their age and saying, if unfortunately we can't test here under 5, you would need to go through the 119 or the .gov approach to the regional testing facility. We did see, could we do that, but could we rather do children under 5, but the policies and the training wasn't in place to do that. So we know there's a need for that testing, but the facilities can't provide it. But we did make sure that we when we were on day 2 of the learning curve, we'd already put enhanced resource in and made clear the position. So we were making sure that people weren't queuing who couldn't get a test. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. The only problem is the nurseries, because obviously they don't come under Lancashire County Council, and most of them are private. And I think we're missing, not us as an authority, but all of us together collectively, and especially the Director of Public Health, getting those messages across, because a lot of nursery children are just being told to go and get a test and then can't get tested. Sorry, back to you, Adrian. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Chair, on this. There is a group within the LRF that looks after education and early years, and So it doesn't matter if the setting is a state setting, an academy, or a private setting. The information is there and it's consistent. So the nurseries, as far as my knowledge goes, they have the same information about what is required. If they are basically not following that procedure and saying to a child who doesn't have symptoms or requiring an entire group of children to get tested, that is not the procedure if they don't have symptoms. If the child who has symptoms should be withdrawn from the setting and seek a test. The rest of the children, until that's a confirmed case, can continue. The information is out there. I'm not an expert on this, but what seems to be happening or have happened is that nurseries were unsure of the position, were incredibly concerned and worried, and basically saying to whole groups of parents, your child needs to be tested, because I have heard that in cases they said that child can't come back to nursery until they have a negative test, even though they had no symptoms, and that is not the procedure. And I understand that information and clarification and a reiteration of the procedure has gone out to all settings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Adrian. Can I bring in Councillor Ron Woolham next, please? And then I've got Councillor John Potter after that. Thank you. Ron, over to you, please.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, I have a question for Matthew, please. We all agree that test and trace is vital and to trying to resolve this dreadful virus, and we all want to work together with it. But my question really relates to the test and tracing in Preston area. Why has Preston Council persistently encouraged people with no symptoms to be tested at the testing stations? To me, this seems a little pointless. We have to use the resources realistically that we have, and we have to prioritise the people, the key workers, and also the fact that Matt Hancock recently gave out instructions that it wasn't necessary for people to go along and be tested without any COVID symptoms. So why is Preston consistently asking for people, everybody, to go and be tested? I know of people who have been several times to be tested with no symptoms at all. It does seem a little bit silly, and I wonder what sort of response Matthew could give me for that, please.
Chair, the leader may want to come in with a response. I have detailed information on this. If the leader needs any further position, because I think we need to make clear that as an area of intervention, we have a specific need that the Secretary of State didn't cover, but in the small print it was there. So I don't know if it's a political point that's being made, but I can cover the detailed procedure if that's required, leader, but I'll leave it to you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think the principle really was around the fact, as Adrian said, that the cases were rising. We were going above 20, so we obviously needed support based on the public health evidence, and some of that support was a testing facility. That is something that arguably we needed back in March or April to ensure that we actually found who had the virus, isolated them so it was spread. So in my mind, this has been months before. It's months after the support we actually needed to effectively tackle COVID. But obviously the evidence was at the time as well, was that a lot of the people who were receiving the virus, the demographic had changed. So there's a lot of younger people. As has been said before, a lot of those younger people had mild or were asymptomatic. So the idea is we'd obviously have the national procedure, which is there for everyone. And obviously we had the facility at Preston's College, which has now moved to Walton Day. We've now got the facility as well at UCLan, which has been opened, I think, this week. But also wanted to catch the amount of people who had this virus, and we wanted to make sure that by having a kind of community testing station, which was publicly run basically by public health with our support, we could actually get the changes that we saw was happening in terms of people who were actually getting the virus a lot more. So that was people of a working age a lot more, people who didn't have symptoms, and we thought the best way to do that was to have these 2 testing stations. And I must say, I do think it has been quite successful. I think it's been very welcomed by people in Preston. It was a facility where people just turn up to get a test. They don't need to have symptoms, and they can actually get that result within 2 or 3 days. So I think it has been very successful. The issue we are getting a bit is that a lot of people who are not resident in Preston are actually using the facilities that we've got as part of the process. And again, that's put a bit of a strain under operating the testing centres in terms of staff resources and other things. But I do think it's been welcome. And it was strategically the situation we found ourselves in, that there was a different demographic. We really hadn't had the provision we wanted for some months. And also that it was mainly younger people who tended to be getting the virus, and many of them didn't have very strong symptoms. So the idea was we increase the testing to those groups as well, and then we have more. We can isolate those people and make sure it doesn't spread as quickly.
Chair, can I just confirm the position with regard to testing in Preston? And it is really important, and it is absolutely part of the procedure for trying to tackle the large number of cases in Preston. And as the leader has said, at the centre of operating and offering testing to anybody and everybody in the city, whether they have symptoms or not. This resource was made available when our rate started to rise back at the beginning or middle of August, when the area of intervention status was placed on the city. And the clear need, and it comes from the guidance of the World Health Organization, which is test, test, test. And you are not going to drive rates down without testing people who may not have any symptoms whatsoever, because we are told that at least 40% of people who have COVID have no symptoms or very, very mild symptoms. And unless you get those people tested, they will not be isolated and you will not protect other people. So the minute the government or the Secretary of State, and he did change the rules, but not for areas of intervention, and the messaging did change from government, but it seemed to change based on a lack of availability of testing rather than what was the best way of tackling the virus. We're not suggesting that people with no symptoms should be getting a test every 5 minutes, but the testing facilities in Preston continue to be open. The community testing facilities are available to those who have no symptoms. And that position was confirmed immediately that there was a change in the messaging from government. We checked it via the Director of Public Health and we were clear with our messaging. And it is really important, given the rates of positive testing in Preston, and we've outlined the current rate in the city and how high that is on the national table, that we must encourage everybody to get tested. That is what the local facilities are for. When, and let's hope that the rates drop way below the national average, and perhaps then testing, or the testing position may change. But at the moment, the position is we invite all for testing, and that is really important. It is not an added luxury. It is the way that we will find out who's got the virus, advise them and require them to self-isolate and protect the community. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you to the leader and thank you to the chief exec. Okay, Ron, do you want to come back on anything, Ron, or are you okay?
Yeah, I thank you, Matthew and Adrian, for that. I still believe that we should use the resource we've got adequately at this current time, and I'm still not convinced that testing of everybody without symptoms is appropriate at this time. However, I'd just like to mention another quick question, if I may, Chair. Councillors have been receiving sort of very limited information about the COVID positive rates in the Preston area, and we've been getting an update from Adrian weekly on the overall rates. I feel there's a little bit of secrecy going on here, that we need to know more information in our wards as to where the hotspots are, particularly with the positive rates. And this could be very helpful in trying to manage our wards a little bit more effectively. Some of the figures do conflict as well for different wards, and we see different areas showing different rates of COVID positive rates. So why aren't we getting more detailed information on this? And for instance, postcodes would be helpful as well. If we could have positive rates by postcode, we could analyse that a little bit more appropriately. I don't know whether that would be a suitable question for Matthew or Adrian to answer, please.
I mean, I think the situation, Rob, is we're seeing infection rates increase across the board, across the whole city, in many places. What we do know is that there tends to be a link between deprivation and infection rates, and obviously that'll probably identify where the water's been slightly higher, but it's becoming a situation where, as Adrian said earlier, we got from 19 cases a few weeks ago now to 130, and it's a national situation where across both the northwest of Lancashire, but across the country and the northwest in particular, we're seeing a big increase. So my own view is that if we're trying to look at a city-wide effort, I don't think breaking the city down into areas and saying, well, it's slightly worse here, slightly better here. I don't think it's going to do us any good. From the beginning, we've said this is going to be a city-wide approach, bringing the whole community together, not saying it's one part of the city or another. I think we've got to do it collectively, and I do understand how frustrated it is for everyone, Ron, and I understand you've been quite a champion about the concerns of local businesses and how restrictions are affecting them. And again, that I do have similar concerns, and that's why I've lobbied for resource to support them. But ultimately, I think we need to take what the scientific advice is and try to promote a kind of like a collective effort across the whole city. That's my own view. As for whether we can ask public health to give information around particular wards, I'll pass it over to the chief executive. It's more of a technical question that I can answer, really. I know we do get them every day via Public Health England. I think it's from Lancashire Public Health that comes from us, and then it's disseminated amongst members. But on the specific, I'll just hand over to Adrian on that one.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and follow on from the leader's points. In terms of data, the information I share with members is, as you'll be aware, and it is marked as such, it's official, sensitive. It is not information that isn't in the public domain. Members no doubt access information that is in the public domain, and I will accept there is a level of confusion perhaps between the two, because what is in the public domain uses what are called medium super output areas, and these are areas larger than ward boundaries. We don't use them generally. They use names for wards that no longer exist. They are not coterminous even with those old wards, because they generally include a population of I believe, no, I can't actually remember the figure, but it's larger than a ward. It may be 1.5 times the size of even the old wards. So these names crop up in the public domain. St George's, for example, is on the list. St George's ward no longer exists, and that then does cause public confusion. But that is the information that's put out there. We have asked that if they are using data, they try and put it in areas that are more identifiable, but the systems are what they are, and I think Public Health England and others are no doubt under the same sort of strain as all of us are dealing with the pandemic. in terms of data that is appropriate to go out to members, the ward level data is accessible to officers, or a limited number of officers, and very few officers have access to postcode data. It is, sensitive information, and it is only shared with a handful of officers. I have access to it, and we use it for analysis, but it would not be appropriate for that to go to members because of the nature of the information. And in terms of knowing exactly where the hotspots are in wards, I mean, they change all the time, and I don't think there's anything that would be adding value to information that if you knew that there were cases down one road. The postcode data is close to identifying individuals, hence it's kept highly secure. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you to both of you for that. Can I move on, please, to Councillor John Potter? John, you wanted to ask some questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I am very close to responding to Ron in terms of what he said, because actually I disagree with it. It is not a wasted resource to test people who don't have symptoms, and it's very careful with that language, because actually we need greater sampling within Preston, and actually it's a testing and a lab capacity that is the issue. So I would say, like I say, be careful with that language, because I don't think that's appropriate. However, my question to the leader and the chief exec is all about the knock-on effects of COVID. And I'd like you guys to put forward to everyone who's watching just how much capacity this is using within our authority, because people might find that other services that the council does have been put under extra strain, maybe not as quick as what they were, and I think there is a definite perception out there that things are getting back to normal, when actually the strain on public sector has been massive. And I would like you to just to put some points across on that, because I think it's a really important one.
Thank you. I'm not sure who wishes to start. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you've put it across quite eloquently yourself. It's been a huge stress for staff especially. Obviously, we're making sure that we actually look after our staff and we're monitoring the situation. We would potentially like to be able to reward them at some point, if that's at all possible, within the budgetary constraints we find ourselves. But you're right, I mean, the test and trace facility, the bit that we're doing, because it's the people that serve our good contact. We were told we had to take that facility on, and we weren't given any resources to do it. So staff on existing services were like taken off other things. Again, we're supporting the testing centres. There's even these COVID marshals that are coming in next week, where again they're asking for council staff to help with that. So all along we're getting very little from government in terms of what we need. Now obviously we're doing what we can. We've done our own things like supporting the market traders and city centre traders. That's all cost money. The infrastructure for food and other support that we mentioned before, community engagement, that's come from us. But ultimately, what I'm a bit worried about is the effect on our resources in the long term, because not only do we have to fight this, we also have predictions of unemployment rates between 10 and 14% and business failure. Now, if that happens, then obviously people aren't paying council tax, businesses aren't paying business rates to our pool, and that's going to put a long-term strain on council resources. So we need to have a bit of thinking about that in the long term. But I'm just really worried. I mean, I'm saying I'm really worried a lot because I genuinely am about, this fantastic council. It's very creative, it's very radical, and it wants to transform our communities and tackle inequality and other things. And I'm just worried about the capacity about delivering our agenda going forward, and also the city centre developments as well, and other things we've got to think about. So, so it's really a plea for government, just please support local government. You see that not just from Preston Council, you see it from the LGA. The LGA, that's often Tory dominated. They're saying to government, please give us some resources and please give us new powers to do things like properly build social housing again for the COVID heroes that got us through this pandemic, really, who have been put last all the time. So You know, so John, it's I think you actually, a bit of a rhetorical question. I think you answered the question by saying it. But yeah, we all know that, you know, we've been put under immense stress. Resources aren't what we want to do, but we're just going to work collaboratively, work with what we have, and really do the best for our community.
Chair, do you want?
Yes, please. Thank you, Adrian.
Well, in terms of, you know, Councillor Potter's question, and I know obviously as a party leader, you know, he has dialogue with the leader, deputy leader, and myself, and you know, I think the council has sought to be very inclusive in terms of the challenges we face, the priorities, and how we're tackling the pandemic. Have we got enough resources? Well, we didn't have enough resources before we went into the pandemic, because we've been reducing staffing for 10 years plus and dealing with austerity. But we do have a really good staff who are very flexible and skilled, and everything we've asked of our staff, they have delivered. It has been hard, and it will continue to be hard. The focus changes. We kept green waste and waste going throughout the worst of the lockdown. We now are having to focus on enforcement. The government, you know, we want more enforcement. We know the public are concerned about those people who seem to get away with being stupid and totally flouting the rules. But, you know, we're having to look there. The Prime Minister's announcement about COVID marshals came without, we understand, any coordination with local government, and there's no funding for it. You know, so that is a concern. Can we put a rank of people out on the streets tomorrow? No, we can't, because we've no funding for it, and they would need to be trained and to do a proper job. We do have highly skilled environmental health officers who've been working throughout, working through weekends, encouraging premises, checking premises are COVID safe, taking appropriate action throughout. We've had other enforcement resource through licensing and other teams. So the whole organisation has been flexed to work on this area, together with delivering, hopefully, everything else. We've taken off our customer contact teams to move into contact tracing, flexible people using the skills they have to track down those that the national system couldn't do. We're sending people out to knock on doors to check that the proper contact tracing is done. We're working on, across the LRF, having a whole beginning to end facility for contact tracing, but there will need to be resource for that. We have had some grants from government, so you know, we obviously have had some additional resource, but our overall budget position, which Councillor Rawlinson will outline to council at the appropriate time, as you know, as all authorities have had a significant hit. We've got limited resources in IT. We could not have operated. We couldn't be having this meeting online without excellent IT provision. You know, that's limited. We look at how meetings are managed. You know, the impact on member services. It takes 3 times as much resource to operate a virtual meeting as it does a face-to-face meeting. We haven't got 3 times the staff to do that, so that is a challenge. That links into IT. It's member service IT and other officers having to do this, and people step up and get on. That's the sort of council that we are. We are dedicated to delivering excellent services for the people of Preston. It's never more important that this authority serves the people through this real crisis that we're facing. So I would like more resource, but the skill for all of us is to maximise and flex the resource. And we will be having to look at how we deal with some areas. We'll need more provision for IT. If we go to hybrid meetings, although we discussed that, we'll need more systems, and potentially in some areas we'll need more staffing. But but local government has no idea what the settlement is going to be next year. The spending review due by the end of the year for all local government will tell us if we've got more money or less, and the fear is it's going to be less. So I don't want to be doom laden, but we've got all this work going on dealing with the pandemic and no certainty as to what our financial position will be from next April. So, you know, major concerns there. But you know, in the meantime, we will all do whatever we can to serve our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you to the leader for that as well. I think you're right, John. It was important to raise that question at this stage and get those messages across. And you know, our staff are so important to us. One of our important assets. I'd say. Have you got anything else you want to add, John, at this stage? Thank you.
No, I'm done. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I know we're going to be having a further discussion on COVID, but you'll have to be below the line, which we've already talked about. So I'll nip back now to the agenda, which was item 11, which is the date of the next meeting, which is 30th of October 2020 at 10 AM. And I'm sure it'll be another webcast meeting at this stage. And then item 12 is the exclusion of the public and press. And we'll now have to consider the following resolution, which I need to read out. That the public be excluded from this meeting during consideration of the following item of business on the grounds that there is likely to be disclosure of exempt information which is described in the paragraphs of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, which is specified against the heading to each item. And that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing it. Is everyone agreed? And obviously, if people don't agree, then please just indicate now. But other than that, I'm presuming that there is a general assent to going below the line. Right, there's nobody raised anything, so that's now agreed. So can I thank any members of the public that have been following this meeting for their attendance? I think it's been a very interesting meeting this morning. Can members now disconnect from this meeting and join the second Skype appointment for Part B items? Anyone not joining us, please can you just let us know, and I shall see you all shortly. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.